Hello everyone. Now with the first video, I was just trying to draw your attention to the fact that that's basically one of the things that motivates me in terms of teaching this course, that the school have been designed for students or people to think that let me finish and get a job, let me finish and work for somebody. So as I keep encouraging you guys that to use this course as a means to motivate your mindset, what can you do for yourself? Start something. I mean, don't be afraid of failing. I mean, start something for yourself so that when you finish school, you rather be a great and an entrepreneur. You be the person to employ others. Yeah, so that is one thing I'm trying to get you follow or get you understand in as part of this course. On that note, we can continue our lecture for today. Our lecture for today is centered on the third part, on the last functions of the management process. And sorry for the background noise. You know, we are in the a school facility which we share, so people do make noise in their rooms, and you cannot. Yeah. So we are looking at the last section, the last functions in the management process, which is controlling. So we've talked about planning, we've talked about organizing, we've talked about leading, and now we are going to talk about control. We've talked the fact that this management process are interrelated. So at the end of this learning outcome, this is the different expectations we are hoping that we should be able to familiarize ourselves with. And this is going to be the introduction of this lecture, the outline, and then we'll look at the control. So controlling. When you are planning your business, or when you are undertaking your business, when you plan, when you organize the organizational structure, and when you lead or tend to influence people, you should also make sure that you take steps to ensure that the plans comes to reality. And those steps that you take to ensure that the plans comes to reality, the activity of ensuring that your plans come to reality is what we are going to discuss. So the control, or what we call the control process, is basically for you to establish and implement a mechanism to ensure that the objectives are achieved. So it's a mechanism, an establishment and a mechanism that ensures that you implement your objectives. What mechanism do you put in place to ensure that your objectives are implemented? That mechanism is what we are discussing today. That is what we are discussing today. So once you are ensuring that you are getting them, your objectives are being attained, that is when you are trying to get what we call the actual performance. You're trying to progress yourself to ensure that the objectives, that is your specific or your standard vision, you get or you work towards it. And so the planning basically is about your visions, and effective control. Control is about how do you achieve those vision, that what you do to achieve them. So this is very important, from the planning through the other processes to control is very important, and that is what we are discussing today. So that is we are going to look at the purpose of control. Now, in terms of the purpose of the control, is basically linked with other planning, organizing, and leading, which I just talked about. Because once you plan, once you set up your objectives, once you are able to organize the resources on the organizational structure, once you're able to influence behavior, you should also go beyond that to ensure that activities are done. They are, and you need to monitor to ensure that whatever plans or goals that you attained or you set, you are close to achieving. Also, one other purpose of planning is control. It helps companies to adapt to environmental change. It helps companies to adapt to environmental change. So through control, it helps you to cope with uncertainty. It helps you to cope with uncertainty. And it is control is so necessary that in changing environments, it is the activity, is the mechanism that you put in place will help you to adjust to new dimension, new changes, so that you don't, have to lose out when the environment is changing. So it also helps to limit the accumulation of error. So control also helps to limit accumulation of error. So when you have an effective control mechanism in the business, it helps you to detect certain errors, and how do you tend to minimize those errors and make sure that you improve the businesses that you operate. Another purpose of control that we can also talk about is that it helps companies to cope with increasing organizational size and complexity, increasing organizational sizes and complexity. Now, as your business tends to take off, it move from small to medium to a large scale. When it gets to a large scale, you realize that there are very, very various components, very various sections, which you need to make sure that you are pushing people there to control, because as business becomes complex, it becomes difficult to control. So once you divide your large businesses into sections, some sections, then you need to ensure that you control these businesses and monitor, so that you were able to rectify weaknesses. You can be able to ensure cohesiveness. You can be able to ensure that businesses move from one place to the other. So that is the one thing, the purpose of the control. The last purpose of control is it minimizes costs. So it minimizes costs. When your control techniques are very effective, it helps you, it shows that since you're having a plan, and with that plan, you are controlling to know the right number of resources that are needed in the businesses, the right number of resources that you are going to use, the right putting people in charge of your machines and things and planning, and you making sure that they get the right thing done. It minimizes the cost of the business. Minimizes the cost of the business. Okay, so just as the management is a process, control too can also be a process, and the process in terms of a 4 level of standards. So it's just basically, if you want to understand the control process, you basically start with what we call the standard goals from planning. So that is what basically link control and planning basically link together in some sense. So when you're in the control process, you start with the standard. And so the setting of standard is basically the main goals or the plans or the visions which you try to set. Then once you set up the goal or the standard, then you need to move to the next step. And the next step is now to measure the actual performance. So to measure the actual performance is for you to put in place certain mechanisms which will help you to detect what you actually attain, what you go to the field, what is the resultant, the actual results. So your standard goals are the what you intend to see, or what you tend to have. So it can be in terms of specific, it can be in terms of your profit standard, it can be in terms of your market standard. Maybe in the near future, you want the market size to be this, you want the productivity, maybe this is the output per worker. You can talk about other departmental aspects. Now you need to make sure that if it is a profit standard, how do you measure? Now with the actual performance is what you actually obtain and what goes on in the field. So once you obtain that, then you move on to the third one. So the third one basically gives you what you call the deviation or the performance gap. The performance gap here is what your vision and what you actually have. So once you are able to determine, then you are able to determine the gap, then you tend to close the gap. When you tend to close the gap. Another important thing we can also talk about is the last one, that is the rectifying the deviation. So you tend to close the gap, and when your standards and the goals, your actuals are the same, which means that your performance gap is 0. Then you need not to rectify any problem. But once there's disparity, then you rectify this, correct this deviations from the standards and the actual. Maybe if you have to lower your standards or you have to increase your standards, you lower your standards, maybe you set up a high standard and your actual performance tends to be so low. So you need to therefore lower your standards so that you can be more realistic. It can be realistic for you to attain those goals. But if you realize that maybe the actual performance also goes beyond, which means that there have been certain new dimensions or new pickups that you have identified in the business that you think that now you can revise your standard goals, and this will be vital for the business growth. Sorry for the background noise. So the process is what I've explained. So this slides, the following slides tend to give some of the points I've already discussed or already summarized. So as we said, the first step in the control process is the establishment of standards, and it's establish a performance standard as strategic points. We can also talk about the fact that the standards can be in terms of profits, the market share, productivity share, staff development standards. Then we can also continue to talk about the second point, that is measure the actual performance. So here, collection of information and reporting on actual performance are continuous activity, meaning that as your business undertake goes on, these are in the information that you obtain, the reporting figures as you get from the field, gives you the what you are, what your performance is. Those are the actuals. This is now projections compared to the first one. The standards are projections. This one is the actual, what happens in the real life or in the real business environment. So your activities need to be quantified. As I said already, I'm just repeating what I've talked about. I just gave a summary. So you need to measure your performance, or you need to measure your performance based on the information and the reports that you get from the business. Then the third one is to evaluate deviation. So we said you determine the performance gap between the standards and the actuals. That is what I said. So deviations occur when the standards is somewhere and the performance, the measurement is somewhere, the actual performance is somewhere. So the differences is what we are terming as deviation, and your goal is to, find means to reduce this. So in terms of finding means to reduce this is what takes us to the third and the last corrective process. Then if the two are the same, then you don't have to review or your standards. But if there's disparity, that is what I talked about, that either you set up your actual performance can be improved to reach the standards, your strategies can be revised to accomplish the standards, or performance standards can be lowered or raised to make more realistic assumption. So we continue and speak about the types of control. So when we talk about the types of control here, we are focusing on the different areas and the levels in which the organization should focus their controlling activities on. And in this section, we've identified four key areas that needs major control or major attention in terms of, as far as control is concerned. So one of them is the physical resources, human resources, the information resources, and financial resources. We are going to take all this and we are going to discuss them, but let me just quickly go through this, just give a brief of these four levels of resources. Now, the physical resources, the physical materials or the physical structures that are used in the business side, the human resources, the human or employment, the labor, the workers that are needed, or the skilled resources that are needed, information in terms of how information is being channeled from information that are needed for the business to grow, and even how it moves from different levels, passing through different levels to their destination. Financial resources, a key component of all businesses. You need to make sure you track your financial resource, your performance, and to ensure that people in there are following what is needed to be followed. So this is what we're going to discuss in the continuing slides. So the control of physical resources has basically two components that we are going to focus on. We will talk about the inventory control and the quality control. Now, the control of physical resources basically concern issues of things that we can see, the physical, the tangible assets of a business. The tangible assets can be in terms of buildings, in terms of office equipment, in terms of furniture, in terms of vehicles, manufacturing machines, equipment, trading stock, raw materials, work in progress, administrative block, and all those things. These are the material components that we are going to look. And we are also continuing to talk about this material, then we have two aspects of physical resources, which we said we are looking at: the inventory control and the quality control. So what is inventory? Inventory here basically refers to reserves of resources held in readiness to produce products and services, as well as the end products that are kept in the stock to satisfy consumers and consumers' needs. So basically, when you talk of inventory, it refers to the goods that are kept in stock, and the goods that are kept in stock can be either raw materials that are being kept or finished products that are being we are finished producing and we have kept and we try to keep in stock. So it involves, you can talk about it can be raw materials, it can be work in process, it can be components and finished goods, but they are all being kept in stock. So it can also take different forms. When you talk of inventory, it's not just about this four, but in terms of the angles or different aspects of businesses, like if you look at it in terms of airline, in an airline, an unsold tickets, for example, and in an airline, for example, a seat that is unsold is an inventory. A seat, if then the aircraft, if you have a seat that has been unsold, is an inventory. So just like your business, if whatever that you produce that you have not sold, that is being kept, whether it is raw materials, whether it is processed or semi-processed, once it is just with the company and they are all part of your inventory. Now, inventory, in terms of trying to understand this, the control system is relevant in the control of inventory. We have three basic components of it. The basic developments of inventory. We can talk about the economic ordering quantity. We can talk about the material requirement planning system, and we can just talk about the just-in system. Now, with the economic ordering quantity, this occurred in the 1915. Somewhere in the 1915, which is basically, an old system. So what happens is that with this kind of inventory, you replenish inventory levels by ordering the most economic quantity. So what that level tends to do is that you tend to order to fill your stock. You order to fill your stock to make sure that you don't short the resources that are needed for your business. So you quickly order to store to fill your stock. But with the material required planning system, with that one tend to improve the weaknesses of the economic ordering system. With that, you only order the materials and the components that are necessary to create the finished product. So you only order the material that are needed. So if you need 100, you only order 100 that are needed. You don't order and make sure that you store them, because it also has its own repercussion. If maybe something happened, there's breakdown and the some of the product may spoil, you don't have to find one thing. So with the material required planning system, you order what is needed for the finished product. Then the final one, the name is the just-in system. Well, so the just-in system basically was associated with the Japan. And here, what happens is that you are more focused on what is needed at a particular point in time. So it is premised on the fact that the actual orders for finished products are converted into orders of raw materials components, so which arrive just in time for the manufacturing process. So the things that you need, you just order them and you just use them for the manufacturing. You don't even order to store them, or you don't order. Once you order, you are using it for the amount that are needed for production. And that is what we call the just-in system. The just-in system. Another aspect of fiscal control is the quality control. And the quality control is about the goods that you produce quality, and it's not just about the goods. There should be a quality management and management system that should ensure that then this quality aspect of the goods are maintained. This aspect is very important because once you're able to attain quality goods, you have what we call the goodwill of the people. People want to associate themselves with you. People, you have the customer base. People would want to, understand what you do, and that is what it gives most business to thrive today. So in terms of trying to understanding control, you must be able to control the quality aspect. So in most businesses, you hear of the quality control section. It's all for them to ensure that businesses our goods are quality and of standard. And you need to also measure. You need to measure and find ways of improving, because most importantly, when goods become more quality, you realize that you are able to produce them at not just at cheaper price, but as quality as well. The heart of every business control is the financial system. So the financial system is very, very important. Now, we can look at it, basically concern ourselves with issues such as the resources that they flow into the organization. So maybe you can talk about the returns on investment, resources that comes to the finance. You can also talk about the financial resources that are held by the organization, such as the working capital or the cash that the organization needs to run its business. You can also have to be concerned with issues of the financial resources flowing out of the organizations, sometimes in terms of the payment of salaries or other expenditure, in terms of the payment of raw materials or other expenditure. So in terms of financial resources is at the heart of every business, and we need to understand the issues of finance, either in terms of the returns on investment, either in terms of the capital, working capital or cash, either in terms of the money that goes out, in terms of payment of salaries or other raw materials. These are all important. Financial management basically also deals with issues of cash flow, cash management, investment returns. Yeah, so all these are all part of the financial control measures. Just like the aspect of under the fiscal, which we talk about the inventory and quality control. Here, one important thing about financial control is the budget. One important thing about financial control is the budget. So a budget is basically a company's preparation in terms of what we intend to spend and how much money should we allocate to it. So, but it's not always about monetary terms. Sometimes it could be in terms of, even in terms of, you have what you call the financial budget. That is where we use monetary aspect to determine, to share for each department what each department tends to spend maybe in a particular period of time, for a year, for some few months, or for some particular period where activity needs to be undertaken. So basically that's what the budget does. So budget contributes to financial control. It supports management in coordinating resources, departments, and projects. It provides guidelines on application of organizational resources. I've talked about all this. It defines sets of standards that are vital to the control process. Make sure that the possible evaluations and departments are used. One important thing about budget is that it gives you a guide. It guides you what actually helps you even to know how to amount that you are spending to produce a particular good, so that you must even it helps you to facilitate your pricing concept and other things. So budget is very, very important. So a budget basically is a formal plan expressed in financial terms that indicates how resources are to be allocated to different activities, departments or sub-departments. So that is basically, a simple definition of a budget. So we've talked about the fact that how it supports management in terms of the benefits of budgets. And we are also going to look at the, I also mentioned the fact that we have different types of budgets, though the most common budgets for many people is the financial budget, but we have different types of budgets. Now, the different types of budgets can be, is the financial budget, the operational budget, and the non-financial budget. So the financial budget is where we use the monetary aspect, the cash flow, to determine our budget. So the focus is on cash flow, capital expenditure. An example is the cash flow budget or capital budget. Then we can have the operational budget. So here we tend to look at the revenue operations. In terms of operations, this is going to be our next presentation, operations management, which is very important. So revenue and other aspects of organization. So here, the example is the sales budget and the contract budget. Then we can also have the non-financial budget, and then here in the non-financial budget, we can have examples as the production in terms of how much we are producing or how much we're able to produce, and the sales in terms of volume and the time projections that we can associate ourselves with. We continue with the other control process or the control types, where we have talked about the fiscal, we have talked about the finance. Here we are focusing on the information, and information is very, very important. How do you channel information from management to the subordinate, from subordinates to people? Imagine that the information from the marketing department signals that there's high demand and it's not able to reach the production unit for them to increase the production. I mean, information needs to be continuous, and in terms of there should be people to make sure that once people call in or there's a demand for something, the information is able to channel through. Information should be vital, it should be relevant, and it should be timely. Because when maybe you're supposed to produce, you know that we are in a season where you're supposed to produce, and you do not produce in that particular season to get the needed market for it, and you wait and you get the information at a time when that information has passed and you go to produce, the company end up losing. So information should be timely. When you have information, should be timely. And they also make sure that there's also a feedback. Like when you send information, there should be a feedback to confirm that you really have information have gotten to your destination, it has been notified, and they are working towards it. The last control resource is the human resource. So human resource is also another important control factor we are discussing. So the human resource basically it entails evaluating the performance of employees, managers in performance of an organization. So in terms of the control aspect, we assess and compare with the predetermined standards tasks of the people that we've employed. We have different mechanisms or different instruments that they can use to monitor the performances of the people we've employed. You can either the labor turnover, absenteeism, composition of labor force. These are all parts of the control of the human resource. So actual performance can also be measured against the standards for feedback to an action by the management. So you can use performance-based analysis. We've talked about it. There are also other human resource control instruments, which we have not mentioned on this slide. It may include specific ratio analysis. So the specific ratio analysis is what we are terming as the labor turnover, the absenteeism, and the composition of labor force. We also discussed the characteristics of an effective control system, and there are 5 main characteristics: integration, flexibility, accuracy, timeliness, and simplicity. Now, to start with integration, as we said, planning among the process, planning and a visionary plan and an effective control are basically what makes businesses better. So they are very, very integrated, and we have to find a means of, as a business, in terms of as a business student, you must understand the cohesion that exists between these two, because they move in tandem. So when it is flexible, when your planning is flexible, it should be accurate and objective, timely, simple. There should be an interface that is helping you to link the two. And this interface is what is even represented on this chart, the integration of planning and control. So now we formulate, in terms of planning system, we formulate our objectives, we formulate plans, we revise objectives, then we retain and modify objectives. So you formulate plans, and in formulating plan, you realize under the control, the 4 main levels that we discussed is to set standards. Once you set the standard, then once you formulate plans and functional strategies, in terms of the function here, you use what we call the measure or the actual performance. So you revise your objective and plans. You only revise your objective and plan when you've been able to compare the differences. There's what we got, the operation performance gap here. So the performance gap here will help you to revise this. And now, once you are able to identify this performance gap, you rectify. Once you rectify, then it goes back to your planning system. You are able to retain or modify your plan. Can you increase it or you decrease it? So this is what we've talked about. So there's some form of integration between planning and control, and it's one of the characteristics of effective control system. It's one of the effective characteristics of effective control system. Another characteristics of effective control system is the flexibility. It's flexibility. Here, the system should be able to accommodate change. So we are saying that when you have an effective control system, the system should be able to adapt to change. Now we are in a system where things are changing, so you need to make sure that you are being flexible. That when there's a new paradigm, you will be able to change to that rhythm, and you'll be able to make your business strive. So timeless adjustments in objective or plans should not be regarded as deviations, but as revised objective or plans. So with the integration that we talked about, once you're able to identify certain gaps and gaps between the actual and performance, you should be timelessly be able to also tend to be flexible to resolve this system so that the company do not suffer. If you do identify a gap and you just leave it on and the gap widens, it becomes difficult to reconcile. That is why I'm saying that your controls should be timeless in terms of flexibility. Flexibility means that you are able to adjust to suit the situation to make sure that you get the best of a thing. We can also talk about accuracy. So accuracy here, we are saying that you should try to minimize errors and deviations in your reports, in your data, or in your information that you obtain. So a total amount expressed in rands certainly does not show a profit, nor it indicates products sell better than the others. So when you are reporting certain information, you should be accurate so that people do not misjudge you or do not have misinterpretation of the information. And being accuracy depends on the reliability of the data. That is one thing. It depends on the reliability of the data. So if your data is unreliable, inaccurate information will lead to inaccurate business outcome. So it's very important. So another important of another characteristic of the effective control system is timeliness. It seems all the three that I've talked about, I've mentioned timeliness. So timely control data are not obtained by means of hasty mischief management. Control data should be supplied regular as needed. So when you talk of timeliness, it means that it's not just about you undertaking a process at a particular point in time, but you undertake it when needed, when it is actually needed. When you undertake a particular process, when it is not needed, the company do not benefit. So it is very, very important. And the last part of the characteristics of an effective control system, which is the simplicity. With the simplicity, what we are saying is that your business should not be so complex. In terms of your control system, should not be so complex, because when it becomes complex, it has some effect. It will have effect on the competent managers. You don't tend to see their ability. They are not flexible enough to, adapt to changes or control the system. So you should be able not to, complicate issues. You should make sure that your system or your control system is simple. It should be clear. It should not. It should be devoid of any form of ambiguity. It should have a focused, sharp, precise, and a simple system, which will help your managers to, or personally, a person's involvement, get motivated to do the things they are supposed to do and do them accordingly. So these are the 5 characteristics of effective management system. And we've talked about the fact of the control system. So we can conclude on this section, which is a simple one, by what we've done today. Today, we looked at the control system as a fundamental function. We've looked at the management process. We looked at the characteristics of an effective control system. We looked at the application of control system should not be complex, that it will cost more than it can save. So basically, this is what we have talked about in terms of the control. We've talked about its integration with planning, and we've talked about each various aspects. So hopefully, I hope we engage more in our discussion. Thank you.